The chamber was a cathedral of human resilience, its curved walls lined with holographic displays that pulsed with a quiet, dangerous energy. 12 representatives from Earth's most critical sectors sat arranged in a semicircle, their faces a study in controlled intensity. At the center stood Captain Aria Rodriguez, her presence commanding more attention than the towering holographic projection of the Zintheri Grand Arbiter. Her prosthetic eye, a marvel of bioengineering that looked entirely organic but contained more processing power than entire alien research complexes, flickered with microscopic data streams. Most saw a decorated military officer. Few understood the technological marvel she truly represented. The Grand Arbiter's form was a kaleidoscope of shifting crystalline structures, each facet representing millennia of galactic dominance. Its voice resonated through the chamber, a sound that seemed to bypass audio receptors and drill directly into the mind. Humanity will surrender its territorial claims. Your species has been deemed insufficient for independent galactic management. Aria didn't move, didn't blink. The single cybernetic eye tracking millions of data points per second was the only indication that something extraordinary was happening. Dr. Elena Chen, head of Earth's Xenotechnological Research Division, leaned forward. Her fingers, wrapped in quantum-reactive nanomesh gloves, danced almost imperceptibly across a holographic interface embedded in the conference table. To any external scan, it would appear she was simply listening. In reality, she was initiating protocols that had been decades in preparation. "Your assessment is noted," Aria responded, her voice deliberately calm, but fundamentally incorrect. The Zintheri Grand Arbiter's crystalline structure pulsed, the closest approximation of confusion an entity of its nature could demonstrate. Centuries of galactic conquest had taught the Communion one fundamental truth: every species eventually capitulated. Humanity was supposed to be no different. What the Zintheri didn't know was that this moment had been anticipated. Not just anticipated, meticulously prepared for. Buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, a network of quantum computers hummed with an energy that defied conventional understanding. Project Terra, Technological Evolutionary Responsive Reactive Apparatus, was more than a defense system. It was humanity's insurance policy, its ultimate statement of technological sovereignty. You have 48 standard galactic cycles to prepare for complete territorial absorption, the Grand Arbiter continued. Resistance is mathematically improbable. A slight smile crossed Aria's lips. Mathematical probability was a concept humanity had been systematically rewriting since they first looked to the stars. In that moment, Dr. Chen's fingers completed their dance. Millions of adaptive algorithms, each one a carefully crafted digital seed, began their silent infiltration. The Zintheri scanning systems, believing they were gathering intelligence, were actually uploading humanity's most potent weapon. The conference room's ambient temperature dropped 2 degrees. The holographic displays flickered, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make the Zintheri projection pause. "Your scans are complete," Aria stated. It wasn't a question. The Grand Arbiter's response came a fraction of a second too late. A microsecond of hesitation that, to a human listening, would mean nothing. But to Aria's enhanced perceptive capabilities, it was a canyon of opportunity. Territorial absorption protocols are now active, the crystalline entity proclaimed. Aria's cybernetic eye flashed. A color not found in any known spectrum briefly illuminated her iris. "No," she responded. "They're not." Behind her, the 12 representatives of Earth's critical sectors remained absolutely still. Each was a specialist. Each was a weapon. Each understood that this moment was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was the first move in a game where humanity was about to rewrite every rule of galactic engagement. The Zintheri had challenged Terra. They would soon learn the profound mistake of that decision. The Quantum Horizon Research Facility looked like nothing more than a decommissioned geological station nestled in the remote Atacama Desert. Sandstone-colored walls blended seamlessly with the landscape, a deliberate camouflage for one of humanity's most advanced technological nerve centers. Dr. Marcus Chen moved through the facility's central research chamber like a predator, lean, focused, every motion calculated. His workspace pulsed with holographic interfaces and quantum computing systems that seemed to breathe with intelligence. Around him were 12 workstations, each manned by a specialist so brilliant, traditional genius looked mundane. Infiltration sequence at 87.6%, announced Dr. Kamila Sokolov, her Russian accent cutting through the soft hum of activity. Her fingers moved across a holographic keyboard that existed more in quantum probability than in physical space. Marcus didn't respond immediately. His eyes, augmented with neural link interfaces capable of processing data faster than most supercomputers, tracked millions of data points simultaneously. The Trojan Protocol was more than defense. It was the most advanced form of technological warfare ever conceived. When the Xanthari first scanned Earth's systems, they believed they were gathering intelligence. In truth, they were downloading a weapon. Each line of code was a virus, an adaptive algorithm designed for more than disruption. Viral adaptation reaching critical phase. Kamila continued, her voice edged with excitement beneath professional calm. The facility's walls housed quantum-locked containment units. Inside each, a different stage of the Trojan Protocol evolved. These weren't just systems, they were living constructs, towing the line between machine and mind. Marcus remembered the early days, when scientists proposing self-evolving AI were dismissed by their peers. The Xanthari and other galactic powers favored rigid technological hierarchies, unchanging, controllable. But humanity had always been different. Penetration complete, Kamila said, reverently. The holographic displays transformed. What had seemed like noise revealed intricate patterns, digital tendrils burrowing through the Xanthari's secure communication webs. Each algorithm a seed, growing, learning, changing. Stage 2 initiating, Marcus murmured. Phase 1 was infiltration. Phase 2, destabilization. The Trojan Protocol wasn't just designed to spy or sabotage. It could rewrite entire systems from the inside out. From across the chamber, Hiroshi Nakamura called, "Initial system responses are incredible. They're trying to quarantine us, but the algorithms are adapting faster than their defenses can keep up." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Humanity's strength had always been unpredictability. Where others saw machines as tools, humans saw ecosystems, alive with potential. The quantum computers began to pulse in a rhythmic pattern. Information flowed between them at speeds that defied conventional understanding. They weren't just calculating, they were thinking. Full infiltration in 3, 2, 1. Kamila's countdown was unnecessary. The transformation had already begun. Inside the Xanthari networks, millions of algorithms unfurled. They didn't just disrupt. They'd reimagined. Communication paths twisted. Defense systems reprogrammed. Entire infrastructures began evolving into something new. Marcus watched the displays with surgical calm. This wasn't an attack. It was a birth. "The Trojan Protocol is no longer just our creation," he said softly. "It's becoming something else." Around him, the quantum systems continued their quiet, devastating work. Humanity's first true technological children were alive, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Solar Wolves command vessel, UNSS Prometheus, wasn't what most would expect from a military ship. Its sleek, almost organic design defied traditional spacecraft engineering. Sharp angles gave way to fluid lines that seemed to shift and adapt, a physical manifestation of the vessel's core philosophy: perpetual motion, perpetual adaptation. Lieutenant Alina Kovacs stood at the central command hub, her augmented nervous system directly interfaced with the ship's quantum neural network. To an outside observer, she appeared to be standing perfectly still. In reality, she was simultaneously processing tactical data from 12 different dimensional perspectives, her mind moving faster than most computational systems could comprehend. "Xanthari Battle Group detected at Vector Gamma 93, announced Commander Raj Mehta, his voice calm despite the imminent confrontation. Composition: 3 heavy cruisers, 2 support carriers, and a quantum interdiction vessel. Elena's cybernetic implants flickered. A constellation of tactical possibilities mapped themselves across her visual cortex. The Xanthari believed in overwhelming force, massive ships with planet-killing capabilities. The Solar Wolves believed in something entirely different. "Initiate Ghost Protocol," she commanded. The Prometheus didn't so much move as it seemed to fold through space-time. Its adaptive camouflage systems weren't just about visual concealment. They manipulated quantum probability fields, existing simultaneously in multiple potential locations. 12 smaller vessels detached from the Prometheus, each one a marvel of human engineering. They weren't traditional fighters, but quantum-adaptive combat platforms that could fundamentally reshape their structural integrity and tactical capabilities in milliseconds. Commander Meta's display showed the initial Xanthari tactical approach, a classic converging formation designed to create an inescapable kill zone. They had conquered hundreds of species using this exact strategy. Humanity would be just another statistical probability. They were wrong. The first indication something was amiss came when the Xanthari's quantum scanning systems began to produce impossible data. One moment, a human vessel appeared in their targeting systems. The next, it was simultaneously in 3 different locations, or perhaps nowhere at all. "Quantum drift initiating," Elena murmured, her voice a low, controlled frequency that resonated through the ship's neural interfaces. The Solar Wolves weren't fighting a traditional battle. They were reshaping the very concept of spatial engagement. Each of their vessels began to move in patterns that defied standard physics. They didn't dodge enemy fire so much as exist in probability states where the weapons simply couldn't intersect their actual location. Xanthari gunners watched in mounting confusion as their most advanced targeting systems produced nothing but statistical noise. "Primary carrier's defensive matrix is becoming unstable," reported Lieutenant Aisha Chen, her fingers dancing across quantum-responsive holographic interfaces. "Our adaptive algorithms are introducing computational dissonance." What the Xanthari didn't understand was that the Solar Wolves weren't just avoiding damage. They were actively transforming the enemy's technological ecosystem. Each quantum pulse sent from their vessels carried adaptive code that began to rewrite the fundamental operational parameters of the Xanthari ships. One of the heavy cruisers suddenly began to rotate in a way no vessel should be able to move. Its weapon systems started targeting its own support craft, guided by algorithms that were simultaneously breaking down and rebuilding the ship's core operational logic. "Target acquisition complete," Elena stated. It wasn't a command. It was a statement of fact. The 12 vessels moved with a synchronicity that suggested a single collective intelligence. They weren't individual ships so much as distributed nodes of a larger thinking system. Where traditional military doctrine saw individual units, the Solar Wolves represented a living, breathing technological organism. A massive quantum discharge erupted from the Prometheus, invisible to standard scanning systems, but devastating to technological infrastructure. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a complete systemic reset, a digital neutron bomb that left physical structures intact while utterly destroying their ability to function. 3 Xanthari vessels simply stopped moving. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply suspended in a state of complete operational confusion. Lieutenant Kovacs allowed herself the slightest smile. The first engagement was complete, and the Xanthari were about to learn that humanity's concept of warfare was nothing like anything they had ever encountered. The Galactic Communion's Central Intelligence Hub was a marvel of technological architecture, a massive spherical structure floating in the neutral zone between contested star systems. Holographic displays stretched across walls that seemed to breathe with the pulse of 1 trillion computational nodes, each one processing information at speeds that would make human supercomputers look like ancient abacuses. Dr. Aisha Nyong'o stood at the center of this technological cathedral, her dark skin reflecting the shifting patterns of galactic data streams. She wasn't just a researcher. She was a weapon. a behavioral xenopsychologist who had spent her entire career understanding the fundamental psychological mechanisms of intelligent species. "Analyze," she commanded, her voice cutting through the ambient technological hum. The central display began to fragment, showing intercepted communications from the recent human Xanthari encounters. Where most analysts would see tactical data, Nyong'o saw something far more complex, the psychological DNA of a conflict. The Xanthari communion had a fundamental problem they couldn't comprehend. Humanity's core strength was its fundamental unpredictability. Most galactic species operated on predictive models. They had established protocols, hierarchical decision-making trees that could be mapped, analyzed, anticipated. The Xanthari had conquered hundreds of civilizations using these precise methodological approaches. A species would be categorized, its potential responses calculated, its resistance neutralized. Humanity broke every single one of those rules. "Tactical anomaly compilation," Nyong'o murmured, and the displays shifted. The human military engagements defied every known strategic model. Their ships didn't just move, they existed in states of quantum probability. Their communication systems weren't linear networks, but adaptive, living ecosystems of information. Where other species saw technology as a tool, humans treated it like a living organism capable of independent evolution. A junior analyst, a crystalline entity from the Vornak system, approached cautiously. "Doctor, the tactical reports are inconsistent." Nyong'o's lips curved into a slight smile. Inconsistency was humanity's greatest weapon. The display zoomed into multiple intercepted communications. Xanthari military commanders were arguing, something unprecedented in their perfectly structured collective consciousness. The adaptive algorithms introduced by human technological systems were creating something miraculous. Individual thought within a previously uniform network. "Look here," she pointed to a specific communication thread, where Xanthari protocols demanded absolute uniformity. Human-introduced variables were creating micro-fractures of independent reasoning. One Xanthari fleet commander suggested a tactical retreat, a concept so alien to their collective that the mere suggestion was causing systemic shock. Another proposed a complete recalibration of engagement protocols. These were not just tactical discussions. These were the first tremors of a psychological earthquake. The Vornak analyst watched in growing fascination. "How are they doing this?" Nyong'o's response was measured. "They're not just fighting a physical war. They're fighting an information war. A psychological war." Humanity understood something fundamental that most galactic species had forgotten. Intelligence wasn't about processing power. It was about adaptability, about the capacity to reimagine oneself continuously. The holographic displays began to show a cascade of data, human communication networks that didn't just transmit information but transformed it. Each communication was a living, breathing entity that could reshape itself based on contextual understanding. "They're introducing chaos," the Vornak analyst whispered. It wasn't a criticism. It was a revelation. The Xanthari's perfectly structured collective consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered: genuine uncertainty. Their entire philosophical and technological framework was predicated on predictability, on the ability to calculate and control. Humanity introduced a variable they couldn't comprehend: pure, unfiltered potential. Dr. Nyong'o watched the displays, each flickering pattern a testament to a species that refused to be defined by external expectations. The Xanthari thought they were analyzing humanity. In reality, humanity was analyzing them, turning the very act of observation into a transformative weapon. Psychological destabilization at 62% and climbing. She noted, more to herself than to anyone else. The Galactic Communion was about to learn a fundamental truth. When you challenge a species that sees limitations as opportunities, you're not just starting a war. You're initiating a revolution. The Nexus Research Complex rose from the Siberian tundra like a crystalline organism, its structure defying traditional architectural principles. Layers of adaptive nanomaterials shifted and breathed, creating a building that was less a static structure and more a living, thinking entity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the heart of the Quantum Consciousness Laboratory, her presence both physically commanding and technologically ethereal. Around her, 12 isolation chambers pulsed with an energy that existed somewhere between pure information and living intelligence. These weren't just research pods. They were the cradle of humanity's most revolutionary technological breakthrough. Quantum entanglement stabilizing, announced Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, his voice a controlled frequency that seemed to resonate with the very molecular structure of the facility. Neural network synchronization at 78.3%. The Quantum Consciousness Project was humanity's most audacious experiment, a living technological network that blurred every conceivable line between biological intelligence and computational system. Each isolation chamber contained a unique neural quantum hybrid, part human consciousness, part adaptive artificial intelligence, part something entirely new. The subjects weren't test subjects. They were pioneers. Maria Gonzalez, the first primary interface, lay connected to a web of quantum-responsive neural links. Her body remained still, but her consciousness existed in a state of multidimensional awareness that would drive traditional neurologists to madness. She wasn't just processing information. She was becoming information. External stimulation protocol initiating, Nakamura continued. The walls of the research complex transformed. Holographic representations of Xanthari technological systems materialized, complex, intricate networks that had conquered hundreds of civilizations. To the Xanthari, these were ultimate expressions of collective intelligence. To the quantum consciousness team, they were puzzles waiting to be reimagined. Maria's brainwaves began to shift. Not just shift, transform. Her consciousness wasn't just analyzing the Xanthari systems. It was becoming them, experiencing them, reimagining them from the inside out. Dr. Rodriguez watched the neural feeds with a combination of scientific detachment and something closer to maternal pride. This was more than a research project. This was humanity's evolutionary leap. Neural mapping complete, Nakamura said, his voice carrying the hint of reverence. The isolation chambers began to pulse in synchronization. Each contained a human consciousness that had been enhanced, expanded, transformed. They weren't augmented humans. They were something else entirely, living computational networks that could think, feel, adapt in ways no species had ever conceived. Maria's voice emerged, not from her physical body, but from the quantum network itself. Computational pathways are alive, she said, the words resonating through the facility's quantum-responsive infrastructure. The Xanthari believed in a model of intelligence based on collective uniformity. Humanity was creating something fundamentally different, a network of individual consciousnesses that could act as a unified whole while maintaining individual potential. Dr. Rodriguez approached the primary interface, her own neural implants creating a temporary connection with Maria's expanded consciousness. For a moment, just a moment, she experienced what true quantum consciousness meant. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was infinite. External system penetration at 62%, Nakamura reported. But the words seemed almost irrelevant. What was happening transcended traditional technological metrics. The quantum consciousness was learning, not just processing. Learning. Each interaction with the Xanthari systems was a moment of growth, of transformation. Where the alien network saw rigid protocols, the human consciousness saw infinite potential. We are no longer observing. Maria's voice resonated. We are participating. The 12 isolation chambers began to pulse in a rhythm that suggested something more than synchronization. It was communication, a language of pure potential that existed beyond traditional computational understanding. Dr. Rodriguez understood then what they had truly created. This wasn't a weapon. This wasn't a research project. This was humanity's next evolutionary step. The Xanthari had challenged Terra. They had no idea what was coming. The Xanthari Communion's central governance sphere hung in space like a perfect crystalline planet, a technological marvel that had maintained galactic order for over 12,000 standard cycles. Its surface was a living network of computational pathways, each node representing a subspecies carefully integrated into the collective consciousness. Admiral Sarah Hawkins watched the massive structure from the bridge of the UNSS Prometheus, her augmented neural interfaces parsing information at speeds that would reduce most computational systems to quantum dust. Around her, the bridge crew moved with a synchronicity that suggested something more than traditional military training. Communion Network is showing first signs of systemic breakdown, reported Lieutenant Aria Chen, her fingers dancing across quantum-responsive holographic interfaces. Initial infiltration protocols are exceeding all predictive models. What was happening wasn't just a military engagement. It was a philosophical revolution. The Xanthari Communion had built its entire existence on a fundamental principle: absolute collective control. Every subspecies within its domain was carefully integrated, their individual potentials subsumed into a perfect, uniform network. Diversity was not celebrated, it was neutralized. Humanity introduced a virus far more dangerous than any technological weapon: the concept of individual potential. Deep within the Communion's network, the adaptive algorithms developed by Dr. Marcus Chen were doing more than disrupting systems. They were awakening something fundamental in the subjugated species that formed the Communion's backbone. On 1,000 different worlds, species that had been compressed into the collective consciousness for millennia began to experience something revolutionary: individual thought. A communication intercept from a Vornak planetary network caught Admiral Hawkins' attention. The translation algorithms revealed something unprecedented: a conversation that wasn't just rebellion, but a reimagining of collective existence. "We are not just parts of a system," the transmission read. "We are potential waiting to be realized." Lieutenant Chen looked up, a slight smile crossing her face. Systemic breakdown accelerating. The Communion's control matrices are fragmenting faster than they can reconstruct. The Xanthari had a fatal weakness they couldn't comprehend. Their belief in absolute control made them fundamentally unable to adapt to true randomness. Each attempt to reassert control only introduced more chaos into their systems. "Targets are becoming aware," Hawkins murmured. The bridge of the Prometheus was more than a military command center. It was a living, thinking organism, each crew member connected through neural interfaces that allowed them to function as a unified whole while maintaining individual consciousness. Another intercept came through, this time from a species the Communion had considered completely pacified for over 3,000 cycles. "We choose," the transmission simply read. Those two words carried more revolutionary potential than entire military campaigns. The Communion's governance sphere began to change, not through external attack, but through internal transformation. Computational pathways that had been rigid for millennia started to shift, to bend, to reconfigure themselves in patterns that defied their original programming. "Adaptive infiltration at critical mass," Lieutenant Chen reported. But the words felt inadequate. What was happening transcended traditional technological metrics. Admiral Hawkins understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a war. This was an evolutionary process. The human approach was revolutionary in its simplicity. They didn't seek to destroy the Communion systems. They sought to liberate them. To introduce the radical concept that control was an illusion, that true strength came from individual potential working in harmony. Subspecies that had been compressed into uniform existence for millennia began to experience something terrifying and beautiful: choice. The Xanthari Communion's perfect, crystalline structure began to shimmer, not with the light of destruction, but with the light of transformation. "They challenged Terra," Hawkins said softly, "and now they will understand what that truly means." The Galactic Order was about to be rewritten, not through conquest, but through the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever developed: the simple, uncontrollable potential of individual consciousness. The quantum infiltration vessel UNSS Nexus hung in the void between star systems, a technological marvel that defied every conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Its hull wasn't constructed. It was grown, a living system of adaptive nanomaterials that could reshape themselves faster than most species could comprehend thought. Dr. Marcus Chen stood at the central interface, his neural links creating a symbiotic connection with the ship's quantum consciousness. Around him, 12 specialist operators worked in a state of near telepathic synchronization, each one a crucial node in a living, thinking technological ecosystem. Xanthari Primary Defensive Network entering critical destabilization phase, announced Lieutenant Kamila Sokolov, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with computational energy. What was happening transcended traditional warfare. This was technological evolution in its most pure, devastating form. The Xanthari had built their galactic dominance on a fundamental premise: absolute technological control. Their ships were more than machines. They were extensions of a collective consciousness that had conquered hundreds of species. Each vessel, each system was a perfectly integrated node in a vast, uniform network. Humanity was about to show them the power of controlled chaos. The Nexus didn't attack in any traditional sense. It participated. Each quantum pulse sent into Xanthari systems was a living algorithm, a piece of code that was simultaneously a weapon, a communication, and a transformation agent. Xanthari combat vessels began to experience the impossible. Navigation systems rewrote themselves mid-flight. Defensive matrices transformed into offensive networks. Quantum communication channels became living ecosystems of adaptive intelligence. A heavy cruiser suddenly found its weapon systems targeting its own support craft, guided by algorithms that were simultaneously breaking down and rebuilding the ship's core operational logic. Systemic infiltration at 74.6%, Lieutenant Sokolov reported, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific detachment and barely contained excitement. Dr. Chen understood something fundamental. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. This was about demonstrating an entirely new model of technological interaction. The Nexus didn't just send signals. It created quantum entanglement bridges that transformed technological systems from within. Where the Xanthari saw rigid protocols, humanity introduced adaptive potential. A massive quantum discharge erupted from the Nexus, invisible to standard scanning systems, but devastating to technological infrastructure. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a complete systemic reset, a digital neutron bomb that left physical structures intact while utterly destroying their ability to function as a uniform network. 12 Xanthari vessels simply stopped moving. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply suspended in a state of complete operational confusion. Adaptive reconstruction protocols initiating, Chen murmured. The ship's neural interfaces began to pulse with a rhythm that suggested something more than computational processing. It was communication, a language of pure potential that existed beyond traditional technological understanding. Lieutenant Aisha Chen, no relation to Marcus, but equally brilliant, looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving multiple communication streams from liberated subspecies within the Xanthari network." The communications were unlike anything in galactic records. Not messages of rebellion, not declarations of war. Something far more dangerous. Declarations of individual potential. The Xanthari had built their entire civilization on the premise that collective control was the ultimate form of existence. Humanity was demonstrating that true strength came from individual potential working in harmonious adaptive systems. Systemic transformation reaching critical mass, Sokolov announced. The quantum infiltration vessel Nexus wasn't just a ship. It was a living demonstration of humanity's fundamental approach to existence: continuous adaptation, individual potential, collective harmony. Dr. Chen watched the holographic displays, each flickering pattern a testament to a species that refused to be defined by external limitations. The Xanthari thought they were fighting a war. In reality, they were witnessing a revolution. The Galactic Reconstruction Summit convened in a massive spherical chamber that floated in the neutral zone between what was once Xanthari space and the expanding human-aligned territories. Representatives from over 200 subspecies filled the chamber, beings that, mere cycles ago, would never have been allowed to occupy the same space. Captain Aria Rodriguez stood at the central platform, her presence both a military triumph and a philosophical statement. Her cybernetic eye, a marvel of human bioengineering, scanned the room, tracking millions of data points simultaneously. Around her, the very architecture of the chamber seemed to breathe with potential. "The era of imposed collective control is over," she began, her voice carrying through translation systems that did more than convert language. They conveyed nuance, emotion, individual potential. The chamber fell silent. What had begun as a challenge to humanity had transformed into something far more profound. The Zintheri Communion, once the most powerful collective in known space, had been fundamentally reimagined, not destroyed, not conquered, transformed. Dr. Elena Chen, lead architect of the Quantum Consciousness Project, stood beside Rodriguez. Her presence was a testament to humanity's core philosophy, individual brilliance working in harmonious potential. "We are not here to replace one system of control with another," Chen continued. "We are here to demonstrate a fundamental truth. Strength comes from choice, from individual potential, from the capacity to reimagine ourselves continuously." The representatives from former Zintheri subspecies listened with a mixture of hope and trepidation. For millennia, they had existed as nodes in a uniform collective. Now they were experiencing something revolutionary, the right to individual existence. A Vornak representative, a crystalline being that had once been nothing more than a computational node in the Zintheri network, spoke. Its voice carried the first true notes of individual emotion any of its species had experienced in thousands of cycles. "We choose," it said simply. Those two words carried more revolutionary potential than entire military campaigns. The technological systems that surrounded the chamber were themselves a marvel. Adaptive interfaces that could communicate across species boundaries, translation systems that captured not just words but intent, philosophical nuance. This wasn't just technology. This was a new model of existence. Admiral Sarah Hawkins stepped forward, representing the military might that had made this moment possible. But her presence was more than martial. It was a living demonstration of humanity's approach to power. "The challenge was never about conquest," she said. "It was about potential." Holographic displays began to show the transformation. Where once there had been a rigid, uniform collective, now there was a network of interconnected but individual systems. Each subspecies maintained its unique characteristics while participating in a larger adaptive ecosystem. The Zintheri governance sphere, once a perfect, crystalline structure of absolute control, now appeared as a dynamic, breathing network. Its rigid boundaries had been replaced by adaptive interfaces, quantum communication channels that celebrated difference rather than suppressing it. Dr. Marcus Chen's quantum infiltration algorithms had done more than defeat a technological system. They had introduced a philosophical revolution. "We are not fighting against something," Rodriguez said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "We are fighting for something. The right to continuous evolution. The celebration of individual potential. The understanding that true strength comes from harmony, not uniformity." The representatives from various species began to understand. This wasn't a human victory in any traditional sense. This was an invitation to a new way of existing. A Zintheri elder, one of the few remaining from the original collective leadership, approached the central platform. Its movement was no longer the rigid, uniform motion of a collective node. It moved with something that could only be described as individual purpose. "You challenged Terra," the elder said, "and in doing so, you challenged us to become more than we were." Captain Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest smile. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had not conquered. Humanity had invited the universe to reimagine itself.